I'm Pat Tully with the Ketchikan Public Library, and this is Reading Aloud. Tonight, I'm going to be reading one article and two speeches by Mark Twain. Twain was not just a journalist and writer, but he was much in demand as a speaker as well. So I'll start with the article, followed by the two short speeches. So we will start. Mr. Bloke's item. Our esteemed friend, Mr. John William Bloke of Virginia City, walked into the office where we are sub-editor at a late hour last night, with an expression of profound and heartfelt suffering upon his countenance, and, sighing heavily, laid the following item reverently upon the desk, and walked slowly out again. He paused a moment at the door, and seemed struggling to command his feelings sufficiently to enable him to speak, and then, nodding his head toward his manuscript, ejaculated in a broken voice, "Friend of mine, oh, how sad," and burst into tears. We were so moved at his distress that we did not think to call him back and endeavor to comfort him until he was gone, and it was too late. The paper had already gone to press, but knowing that our friend would consider the publication of this item important, and cherishing the hope that to print it would afford a melancholy satisfaction to his sorrowing heart, we stopped the press at once and inserted it in our columns. Distressing accident. Last evening, about 6 o'clock, as Mr. William Schuler, an old and respectable citizen of South Park, was leaving his residence to go downtown, as has been his usual custom for many years, with the exception only of a short interval in the spring of 1850, during which he was confined to his bed by injuries received in attempting to stop a running-away horse by thoughtlessly placing himself directly in its wake, and throwing up his hands and shouting, which, if he had done so even a single moment sooner, must inevitably have frightened the animal still more, instead of checking its speed, although disastrous enough to himself as it was, and rendered the more melancholy and distressing by reason of the presence of his wife's mother, who was there and saw the sad occurrence, notwithstanding it is at least likely, although not necessarily so, that she should be reconnoitering in another direction when incidents occur, not being vivacious and on the lookout, as a general thing, but even the reverse, as her own mother is said to have stated, who is no more, but died in the full hope of a glorious resurrection, upward of 3 years ago, age 86, being a Christian woman and without guile, as it were, or property. In consequence of the fire of 1849, which destroyed every single thing she had in the world. But such is life. Let us all take warning by this solemn occurrence, and let us endeavor to so conduct ourselves that when we come to die, we can do it. Let us place our hands upon our heart, and say with earnestness and sincerity that from this day forth we will beware of the intoxicating bowl. First edition of the Californian. The head editor has been in here raising the mischief, and tearing his hair and kicking the furniture about, and abusing me like a pickpocket. He says that every time he leaves me in charge of the paper for half an hour, I get imposed upon by the first infant or the first idiot that comes along. And he says that the distressing item of Mr. Bloke's is nothing but a lot of distressing bosh, and has no point to it, and no sense in it, and no information in it, and that there was no sort of necessity for stopping the press to publish it. Now all this comes of being good-hearted. If I had been as unaccommodating and as unsympathetic as some people, I would have told Mr. Bloke that I wouldn't receive his communication at such a late hour. But no, his snuffling distress touched my heart, and I jumped at the chance of doing something to modify his misery. I never read his item to see whether there was anything wrong about it, but hastily wrote the few lines which preceded it and sent it to the printers. And what has my kindness done for me? It has done nothing but bring down upon me a storm of abuse and ornamental blasphemy. Now I will read that item myself and see if there is any foundation for all the fuss. And if there is, the author of it shall hear from me. I have read it, and I am bound to admit that it seems a little mixed at first glance. However, I will peruse it once more. I have read it again, and it really does seem a good deal more mixed than ever. I have read it over 5 times, but if I can get at the meaning of it, I wish I may get my just deserts. It won't bear analysis. There are things about it which I cannot understand at all. It don't say whatever became of William Schuler. It just says enough about him to get one interested in his career, then drops him. Who is William Schuler anyhow? And what part of South Park did he live in? And if he started downtown at 6 o'clock, did he ever get there? And if he did anything happen to him? Is he the individual that met with the distressing accident? Considering the elaborate circumstantiality of detail observable in the item, it seems to me that it ought to contain more information than it does. On the contrary, it is obscure, and not only obscure, but utterly incomprehensible. Was the breaking of Mr. Schuler's leg 15 years ago the distressing accident that plunged Mr. Bloke into unspeakable grief and caused him to come up here at dead of night and stop our press to acquaint the world with the circumstance? Or did the distressing accident consist in the destruction of Schuler's mother-in-law's property in early times? Or did it consist in the death of that person herself 3 years ago, albeit it does not appear that she died by accident? In a word, what did that distressing accident consist in? What did that driveling ass of a Schuler stand in the wake of a runaway horse for, with his shouting and gesticulating, if he wanted to stop him? And how the mischief could he get run over by a horse that had already passed beyond him? And what are we to take warning by? And how is this extraordinary chapter of incomprehensibilities going to be a lesson to us? And, above all, what has the intoxicating bowl got to do with it anyhow? It is not stated that Schuler drank, or that his wife drank, or that his mother-in-law drank, or that the horse drank. Wherefore, then, the reference to the intoxicating bowl? It does seem to me that if Mr. Bloke had let the intoxicating bowl alone himself, he never would have gotten into so much trouble about this exasperating imaginary accident. I have read this absurd item over and over again, with all its insinuating plausibility, until my head spins. But I can make neither head nor tail of it. There certainly seems to have been an accident of some kind or other, but it is impossible to determine what the nature of it was, or who was the sufferer by it. I do not like to do it, but I feel compelled to request that the next time anything happens to one of Mr. Bloke's friends, he will append such explanatory notes to his account of it as will enable me to find out what sort of accident it was and whom it happened to. I had rather all his friends should die than that I should be driven to the verge of lunacy again in trying to cipher out the meaning of another such production as the above. The end. So this is the first of 2 speeches, short speeches, that I'm going to be reading that Mark Twain delivered. This first one was delivered at the banquet in Chicago, given by the Army of the Tennessee, that would be one of the armies in the Civil War, to their first commander, General U.S. Grant. This happened in November of 1879, and the title of the speech is called The Babies. The 15th regular toast was, "The babies. As they comfort us in our sorrows, let us not forget them in our festivities." I like that. We have not all had the good fortune to be ladies. We have not all been generals, or poets, or statesmen. But when the toast works down to the babies, we stand on common ground. It is a shame that for 1,000 years the world's banquets have utterly ignored the baby, as if he didn't amount to anything. If you will stop and think a minute, if you will go back 50 or 100 years to your early married life and recontemplate your first baby, you will remember that he amounted to a good deal, and even something over. You soldiers all know that when that little fellow arrived at family headquarters, you had to hand in your resignation. He took entire command. You became his lackey, his mere body servant, and you had to stand around too. He was not a commander who made allowances for time, distance, weather, or anything else. You had to execute his order whether it was possible or not. And there was only one form of marching in his manual of tactics, and that was the double quick. He treated you with every sort of insolence and disrespect, and the bravest of you didn't care to say a word. You could face the death storm at Donelson and Vicksburg and give back blow for blow, but when he clawed your whiskers and pulled your hair and twisted your nose, you had to take it. When the thunders of war were sounding in your ears, you set your faces toward the batteries and advanced with steady tread. But when he turned on the terrors of his war whoop, you advanced in the other direction, and mighty glad of the chance, too. When he called for soothing syrups, did you venture to throw out any side remarks about certain services being unbecoming an officer and a gentleman? Nope. You got up and got it. When he ordered his pap bottle and it was not warm, did you talk back? Not you. You went to work and warmed it. You even descended so far in your menial office as to take a suck at that warm, insipid stuff yourself to see if it was right. 3 parts water to 1 of milk, a touch of sugar to mollify the colic, and a drop of peppermint to kill those immortal hiccups. I can taste that stuff yet. And how many things you learned as you went along. Sentimental young folks still take stock in that beautiful old saying that when a baby smiles in his sleep, it is because angels are whispering to him. Very pretty, but too thin. Simply wind on the stomach, my friends. If the baby proposed to take a walk at his usual hour, 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't you rise up promptly and remark, with a mental addition which would not improve a Sunday school book much, that that was the very thing you were about to propose yourself? Oh, you were under good discipline as you went fluttering up and down the room in your undress uniform. You not only prattled undignified baby talk, but even tuned up your martial voices and tried to sing. Rockabye Baby in the Treetop, for instance. What a spectacle for an army of the Tennessee. And what an affliction for the neighbors, too. For it is not everybody within a mile around that likes military music at 3 in the morning. And when you had been keeping up this sort of thing for 2 or 3 hours, and your little velvet head intimated that nothing suited him like exercise and noise, what did you do? You simply went on until you dropped in the last ditch. The idea that a baby doesn't amount to anything. Why, one baby is just a house and a front yard full by itself. One baby can furnish more business than you and your whole interior department can attend to. He is enterprising, irrepressible, brimful of lawless activities. Sufficient unto the day is one baby. As long as you are in your right mind, don't you ever pray for twins. Twins amount to a permanent riot. And there ain't any real difference between triplets and an insurrection. Yes, it was high time for a Toastmaster to recognize the importance of the babies. Think what it is in store for the present crop. 50 years from now, we shall all be dead, I trust. And then this flag, if it still survive, and let us hope it may, will be floating over a republic numbering 200 million souls, according to the settled laws of our increase. Our present schooner of state will have grown into a political leviathan, a great eastern. The cradled babies of today will be on deck. Let them be well trained, for we are going to leave a big contract on their hands. Among the 3 or 4 million cradles now rocking in the land are some which this nation would preserve for ages as sacred things, if we could know which ones they are. In one of these cradles, the unconscious Farragut of the future is at this moment teething, think of it, and putting in a world of dead, earnest, unarticulated, but perfectly justifiable profanity over it, too. In another, the future renowned astronomer is blinking at the shining Milky Way with but a languid interest, poor little chap, and wondering what has become of that other one they call the wet nurse. In another, the future great historian is lying, and doubtless will continue to lie until his earthly mission is ended. In another, the future president is busying himself with no profounder problem of state than what the mischief has become of his hair so early. And in a mighty array of other cradles, there are now some 60,000 future office seekers, getting ready to furnish him occasion to grapple with that same old problem a second time. And in still one more cradle, somewhere under the flag, the future illustrious commander-in-chief of the American armies is so little burdened with his approaching grandeurs and responsibilities as to be giving his whole strategic mind at this moment to trying to find out some way to get his big toe in his mouth. An achievement which, meaning no disrespect, the illustrious guest of this evening turned his entire attention to some 56 years ago. And if the child is but a prophecy of the man, there are mighty few who will doubt that he succeeded. The end. And the third piece that I'm going to read is another speech to the New Vagabonds Club of London, made up of the leading younger literary men of the day. They gave a dinner in honor of Mr. Twain on July 8th of 1899. And it's called Theoretical Morals. It has always been difficult. We'll leave that word difficult. Not exceedingly difficult, but just difficult. Nothing more than that. The slightest shade to add to that. Just difficult. To respond properly in the right phraseology when compliments are paid to me. But it is more than difficult when compliments are paid to a better than I, my wife. And while I am not here to testify against myself, I can't be expected to do so. A prisoner in your own country is not admitted to do so. As to which member of the family wrote my books, I could say in general that really I wrote the books myself. My wife puts the facts in, and they make it respectable. My modesty won't suffer while compliments are being paid to literature, and through literature to my family. I can't get enough of them. I'm curiously situated tonight. It so rarely happens that I'm introduced by a humorist. I am generally introduced by a person of grave walk and carriage. That makes the proper background of gravity for brightness. I am going to alter to suit, and happily I may say some humorous things. When you start with a blaze of sunshine and an upburst of humor, when you begin with that, the proper office of humor is to reflect, to put you into that pensive mood of deep thought, to make you think of your sins, if you wish half an hour to fly. Humor makes me reflect now tonight. It sets the thinking machinery in motion. Always when I am thinking, there are some suggestions of what I am, and what we all are, and what we are coming to. A sermon comes from my lips always when I listen to a humorous speech. I seize the opportunity to throw away frivolities, to say something to plant the seed, and make all better than when I came. In Mr. Grossmith's remarks, there was a subtle something suggesting my favorite theory of the difference between theoretical morals and practical morals. I try to instill practical morals in the place of theoretical, but as an addendum and annex, something added to theoretical morals. When your chairman said it was the first time he had ever taken the chair, he did not mean that he had not taken lots of other things. He attended my first lecture and took notes. This indicated the man's disposition. There was nothing else flying around, so he took notes. He would have taken anything he could get. I can bring a moral to bear here, which shows the difference between theoretical morals and practical morals. Theoretical morals are the sort you get on your mother's knee, in good books, and from the pulpit. You gather them in your head and not in your heart. They are theory without practice. Without the assistance of practice to perfect them, it is difficult to teach a child to be honest, don't steal. I will teach you how it should be done, lead you into temptation, teach you how to steal, so that you may recognize when you have stolen and feel the proper pangs. It is no good going around and bragging you have never taken the chair. As by the fires of experience, so by the commission of crime, You learn real morals. Commit all the crimes. Familiarize yourself with all sins. Take them in rotation. There are only 2,000 or 3,000 of them. Stick to it. Commit 2 or 3 every day. And by you will be proof against them. When you are through, you'll be proof against all sins and morally perfect. You will be vaccinated against every possible commission of them. This is the only way. I will read you a written statement upon the subject that I wrote 3 years ago to read to Sabbath schools. Here the lecturer turns his pockets out, but without success. No, I've left it at home. Still, it was a mere statement of fact, illustrating the value of practical morals produced by the commission of crime. It was in my boyhood just a statement of fact. Reading is only more formal, merely facts, merely pathetic facts, which I can state so as to be understood. It relates to the first time I ever stole a watermelon. That is, I think it was the first time. Anyway, it was right along there somewhere. I stole it out of a farmer's wagon while he was waiting on another customer. Stole is a harsh term. I withdrew. I retired that watermelon. I carried it into a secluded corner of a lumber yard. I broke it open. It was green, the greenest watermelon raised in the valley that year. The minute I saw it was green, I was sorry and began to reflect. Reflection is the beginning of reform. If you don't reflect when you commit a crime, then that crime is of no use. It might just as well have been committed by someone else. You must reflect or the value is lost. You are not vaccinated against committing it again. I began to reflect. I said to myself, what ought a boy to do who has stolen a green watermelon? What would George Washington do, the father of his country, the only American who could not tell a lie? What would he do? There is only one right, high, noble thing for any boy to do who has stolen a watermelon of that class. He must make restitution. He must restore that stolen property to its rightful owner. I said I would do it when I made that good resolution. I felt it to be a noble, uplifting obligation. I rose up spiritually stronger and refreshed. I carried that watermelon back, what was left of it, and restored it to the farmer, and made him give me a ripe one in its place. Now you see that this constant impact of crime upon crime protects you against further commission of crime. It builds you up. A man can't become morally perfect by stealing 1 or 1,000 green watermelons, but every little bit helps. I was at a great school yesterday, St. Paul's, where for 400 years they have been busy with brains and building up England by producing Pepys, Miltons, and Marlboroughs. 600 boys left to nothing in the world but theoretical morality. I wanted to become the professor of practical morality, but the high master was away, so I suppose I shall have to go on making my living the same old way, by adding practical to theoretical morality. What are the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome, compared to the glory and grandeur and majesty of a perfected morality such as you see before you? The new vagabonds are old vagabonds undergoing the old sort of reform. You drank my health. I hope I have not been unuseful. Take this system of morality to your hearts. Take it home to your neighbors and to your graves, and I hope it will be a long time before you arrive there. The end. Thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you have a very good week.